get everybody here?
I'm not.
You're not there?
Kind of hard to know under this format we're using.
Yeah, and I'm a novice at technology, so I'm glad I got people here that can walk me through when I have issues. But I chose to teach this class for several reasons. The Commissioner's introduction to valuing diversity. I'm a child of the 60s from the Deep South. I was in an all-white school. The black school was just down the road. All the prejudicial things that were happening in that era, I was right there as a teenager, and I saw it firsthand. That being said, even though my scouting experience was in South Texas, I never really felt like we were excluding anybody on purpose. My hindsight says that that wasn't a case, but I guess maybe we were and not even knowing about it. So let's dive into this. Our learning objectives today is to define diversity, explore the cornerstones of what that diversity is, and explain what diversity brings to scouting. So the slide presentation says, I'm going to try this. It says to have everybody type into the chat box without hitting enter what it means, what diversity is, and then on the count of three, I'll hit it. So I'll give you just a minute to answer that question. What is diversity? And then we're going to hit enter all at the same time. Let's see what your answers are here. What makes us unique and special? Diversity means we are all valued the same way. Differences, gender and education, including all. Thank you for those comments. So I think this word puzzle here explains those same things that we just said. Diversity, gender, equal, disabilities, opportunities, justice, class, beliefs. This is an extremely hot topic in our culture right now. And I find myself learning prejudices I had that I didn't even know I had. I guess, you're kind of blinded by this. You didn't really realize that you felt that way. And so it doesn't surprise me that we find things that we all need to work on, and scouting certainly has had that. But like I said earlier, I was never aware when we were what we would consider prejudicial, but evidently we were. So diversity is the ways we are different, the conditionings of having unique characteristics. Inclusion is the action or state of including or being included within a group. They give the example of diversity is when you're invited to the party. Inclusion is when you've been invited to dance. And that makes sense. Most of the rest of our presentation today is this game. So we have 30 questions. And I thought I was going to have a little fun with this. Can you see that? I bought a bingo game, and all the numbers are on this bingo game. And so I'm going to just start at the top. James, you get the first question. So I'm going to roll it. You get question number 25. How can your community promote acceptances of differences?
So How come I can-
Anybody else that wants to chime in is fine. I don't want to just pick on James, but they're,
okay, no, but I think one is to value everybody the same and to be accepting of everybody regardless where they're from. I think one of the things in life is that there's this natural human tendency to be fearful of the unknown. And so when someone moves in to your neighborhood or community that is different than the rest of the people on the street, there's this little like, oh my gosh, who is this person? But I think the more we get to know people, we find out that for the majority of the things, we're all very, very similar in our wants, our needs, and our likes and our dislikes. But I think, that it's okay to be different and just to be opening and welcoming.
Can I add something?
please.
So yeah, that's I've just been working with Scouts on their citizenship in society merit badge. And so what he talked about was equality, treating them equal. The other hand of it is equity, treating them with what they need, giving them with what they need. People are different. Not everybody needs the same thing. So that's part of accepting their differences, is giving them what they need, not just giving them what everybody else gets.
That's a good point. Now, we've got a lot of these. Some of these we'll spend a little more time on than others, but let's go to the next one. So, okay, Richard, you're next. You get question number 11. Behind door number 11, we have, tell of an instance when someone went out of their way to make you feel included.
Okay, that's actually kind of an easy one. My very first Scout trip, I was 13 years old, and they didn't know me very well in the troop. I mean, I was a friend with one of the guys in the patrol. He's the one who got me in there. And although we most of the time cooked by patrol, this time it was being cooked by the adults. And I walked over to the adults area. I think we were out at Simpson Springs. I said, so what's for dinner? And he says, we're having pork chops. Real excited. I went, I'm Jewish. I mean, I can still see the looks on all of the adults' faces as their jaws dropped. What are we going to do? But it was okay. They ended up making me a different dinner that was good and all the rest of that stuff. There were no problems with that. And I felt like I was still part of that. I was still included.
I could not think of a better story to tell in a setting like this.
But that's equity, right, Richard?
Well, I'm
right.
sure.
I mean, they didn't give me the same thing. They didn't try to bend everything. They just made sure that I was included.
And they could have at the same time chosen a different path and said, well, you're just out of luck, aren't you? Because we brought pork chops. That could have been another option. So it's good you had a good experience.
I can assure you that as a Jew, there were plenty of times when situations similar to that or analogous to that did happen to me.
Okay, let's see. Lee, you're up. And your number is number 9. So we got number 9 here. How do you respond to jokes that are demeaning or derogatory?
I had that happen at a scout meeting in my backyard about a week ago. We had 5 young men and 1 young lady at the introduction for leadership skills for troops meeting. And turns out the young lady and one of the young men was related She's actually his niece. And anyway, they're a generation apart, but they're the same age. And during one of the activities, he said something about she always gets the rotten stuff because she's rotten.
Oh,
And I mean, yeah, I understood it was kind of within the family and it was a traditional kind of thing, but I couldn't let it go. So I simply just quietly told him that we just don't demean anybody in Scouts. I mean, I had to say something.
let me throw out an example that is very prevalent, or at least used to be, that I don't think a lot of people even give second thoughts about. Campfire songs and skits. When I was directing summer camps, when you're spending 8, 10, 12 weeks every summer for year after year, you've seen just about every kind of skit you had. But there's a real reason why you have these skits and jokes pre-approved before they're performed in front of everybody. I cannot tell you the number of skits and jokes that were demeaning or derogatory, making fun of handicapped people, making fun of different ethnic groups, making fun of even individuals. That was something very prevalent in scouting that maybe it's still around, but I think we've gotten a whole lot better at it. Okay, let's see, who's next?
Just on that last point,
Yes,
because I was in a Rotary training or they brought this up as well, and some of the comments were like, well, afterwards maybe don't make a scene, pull the person aside and let them know why that wasn't appropriate. And I disagree with that. I think you don't have to call them out right there, but you just might say, you know what, that's not really appropriate, and move on, and then pull them aside afterwards. But part of the thing about just ignoring it is that it might, come across as complicit and say that, that's acceptable. And we need to kind of curtail that behavior immediately, let people know it's not acceptable.
I hope no one's complicit in this. As a director of summer camp, I was very proactive in this. And I would even go so far as to say there was inappropriate skits and things during wood badge campfires and things. You get this old school stuff going and they don't even think twice about it. But let's move on. Okay, who's my next customer here? That's you, Jared. So I turned the barrel and you get number 10. Where's number 10? Talk about a time when you felt like an outsider and how you dealt with it.
So I moved to North Carolina in 2008, and right at the heart of the election. And so having grown up in Utah, it was a little different, but I was also the only white member of my staff. And so for me, it was a culture shock also of my employees. It was mostly people of color. And so for me, it was more of, I just asked a lot of questions and I said, this is new for me. And, I want to understand. I want to understand what, please, if there's something that I inadvertently come across as insensitive, both from being from Utah, being LDS, and now in a situation where none of that applied, please let me know, because I want to make sure that I'm considered, and I want to be part of this team. And so I think that was just it, just saying, I don't know what I don't know, but I want to know and be better. And it really was an eye-opening experience and a wonderful experience. But it wasn't that I knew I was an outsider for many reasons in that situation. But I just asked the question and made them feel like I want to be taught. I want, and I'm going to make mistakes, but please realize it comes from a place of ignorance, not intention.
When I looked at this question in preparation, I figured that my default reaction was just to blend in with the wall. I've become a wallflower. If I'm standing out, I just don't say anything. I just kind of go with the flow, rather than make a big deal out of it. But I think we all react different ways, and certainly if it was something offensive, I would say something. Okay, let's see, who's next? Todd, and your number is, this is fun, I get to turn the barrel, number 19. Number 19. In what way can we support people with physical disabilities?
We can take some thought as to not just the activity, but how they'll get there. I'll share, I have an older brother who has artificial legs, and I invited him to come share with our Cub Scouts about his scouting career. He's older now, he's 60 years old. But invited him to come, and one of his first questions was, your meeting place, does it have an ADA accessible ramp? And I went, I hadn't thought about it. Of course it does, but I hadn't thought about it, and it made me think, yeah, he not just needs to be there and interact in the activity, he needs to get there. So giving some thought, just giving some thought is what I would say.
Hey, Jim, can I chime in on that one real
Yeah,
quick?
please do.
I have a physical disability. For the last 5 years, I require assistance to walk, whether it's a cane, some days it's a walker, sometimes it's a wheelchair, depending on how bad it is. One thing that I've learned, or that I didn't realize before, is people with the best of intentions will come up and say, let me do that for you. And you kind of have to say, look, they're just being helpful. But I found it would be better just come up and say, don't assume they need help. Just say, would you like help with that? The little bit of difference is not saying you can't do this, so I'm going to do it for you. But it's more of, I'm aware this might be challenging. Would you like some help? But that way I can say, no, but thanks for the offer, rather than I can do it myself. It's a much different situation.
That's a really good point.
Thank you, Jared.
Who's next here?
Can I jump in?
Yeah, please.
Just make a comment about this, because this is something that I've run across, well, for the last 35, 36 years. Sometimes a physical disability is not apparent. Sometimes people just ignore those kinds of things. I'm a type 1 diabetic. Food and the timing of food and the correct type of food is what keeps me alive. But unfortunately, fortunately, I look quite healthy. And blindness and a wheelchair or a cane or something like that is something that is very obvious. Be aware of physical disabilities that are not necessarily obvious. Some of them are quite hidden. And some people feel a certain stigma towards them as well. And you need to be aware of those kinds of things and work with that as well.
Well, you bring up a really good point, Richard, because having not just diabetic, but various food allergies is right on point with what we're talking about here. Inclusion and being aware and pre-planning. In your case, pre-planning meals, everybody involved, and in the other case with pre-planning exits and ways to get from point A to B, transportation options. Okay, let's see. David Hatch, you get number 1. David, you're number 1. When did you first become aware of racial or ethnic differences?
I would probably say that was when I was a kid. I had the great opportunity to grow up in a small community here in Utah, and right next door to our elementary school was a special school that had a lot of people with disabilities, some very extreme, and so we saw a very diverse population because it was the only school in Davis County that had that opportunity for them. And so that introduced me at a young age to people that had different racial backgrounds and different ethnic ideas.
Utah, by and large, is a white bread world.
Yeah.
There's lots of areas that don't have any diversity at all.
Yeah.
And so that's fortunate that you were able to get that at an early age. Okay, let's see, who's next? That would be Leslie. Leslie, you get number 5. What's behind door number 5? What are the benefits of diversity?
The benefits are that you're involving everyone and meeting the needs of everyone. So you're going to have a stronger organization. You'll want more people to participate with you. And I can use any other help that anybody else would like to add.
Well, we're going to actually talk more about that particular topic in a little bit because there's a lot of benefits, both obvious and not so obvious, but I'll just defer that answer for just a moment here. Okay, who's next? Alan. Alan, you get number 15. Number 15. Why do people tend to seek friends that are similar to them?
I think it's back to that thing that a lot of times we don't like change. We don't, we like things that are comfortable. We like to go to places we know. We don't seek out some new adventures, and even in friendships, we don't seek out those people. And I think it's a natural thing, but I think it's a natural thing that we need to overcome if we're going to really make our lives diverse and respect everyone.
Well, I'm with you. It's just a natural trend to find people that have similar interests and pal around with them. And that in and of itself becomes a little exclusive. But you're right, broadening our horizons, that's the answer we're looking for. Okay, let's see, who's next? Leela. Leela, you have answered question number 20. What would be hardest about having an unseen difference or disability? And we've already talked about that, haven't we? That's with Richard, with the food, and there's other unseen differences. But what would be the hardest thing about having an unseen difference?
I would say having people not understand you or what's going on. Back to what Richard said, I'm type 2 diabetic, and to have people continually shoving sugar and desserts in your face and be, acting offended if you don't want to participate or whatever it is. And, I've got friends that have mental disorders that, wow, you wouldn't know it looking on the outside. I mean, one of my grandsons has I don't know what you call it, I can't even remember, but he seems pretty normal until you get him in a certain situation, and then there's a problem. So it's just having people understand what's going on. and knowing those things and feeling like, oh, don't do that to me, just let me be, leave me alone, that kind of thing.
Well, and maybe those people don't really want other people to know that they've got this disability.
It's true.
Yeah, they don't want to share. Okay. Oh, who's next? I got to the bottom of my screen here, and you guys keep changing places on my screen, so we'll just go back up to the top here. David, you've worked your way back up to the top, so you get another question here on my screen. Let's see, number 6. Number 6, what is that one? How do your thoughts about diversity differ from your parents? Oh, that's a good one.
It was really interesting, and I don't know. My mother, who grew up around a very diverse environment, lived in California, where my father grew up after they got married, and she had not been integrated into the system too much, and she was afraid to touch people sometimes. She was a school teacher, and sometimes it required that she touch people, and it was hard to make that change. And anyways, it was because of the diverse racial backgrounds in the area that they were living in that it was a very big surprise to her. And those views didn't necessarily get passed on to myself, which was great. I think that my parents were very open about stuff, and so in that way, I think I think it has to do with the fact that you're where you grow up is sometimes encloses you in an environment that when you go outside of that environment, things are very different. And so
Well,
I don't know that I answered the question, but anyways, that was the thing that surprised me when my mother talked about that, and I kind of went, whoa, Mom.
I think each generation, the parents of each generation change a little bit. Like I said at the first of our meeting here, I was born in the Deep South, and my parents, with the segregated schools, that was just a matter of fact with me. I wasn't encouraged. I really didn't even have the opportunity to pal around with other diverse groups. We were segregated, and that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
And it wasn't okay, but that's the way we were brought up back then.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, who's next? Alan, you worked your way back up to the top again. Alan, you get number 2. Let's see what's behind door number 2. Share a situation when you were in the minority.
That would probably be when I was in the military.
Okay.
I was a minority religious and was around more people of different ethnicity and lived in different states. And in the basic training, they took us and they said, okay, count off 1, 2, and the one's the guy next to it. So 2 is your buddy, and you better be with your buddy. If you ever leave the barracks, make sure you 2 are together. And my buddy ended up being a fellow by the name of Von Joshua, a African-American fellow from Oakland, California. And he was a professional baseball player at the time he was in the Dodgers farm club. And so that was a very interesting deal. And then when my next assignment, most of the guys in my barracks were African-American, and some of my best friends were them. And I had known maybe a handful of African-Americans, and never any as close as that when I was and the military.
You adapted well. Good for you.
I did. I was surprised. I surprised myself.
Okay, number 3, and on my screen, I got Leela as the next one. Number 3, describe a time when you witnessed discrimination.
Oh,
And by the way, I forgot to say you can pass if you want to pass.
no, the thought that just came into my mind was we were ministers to a sober living home. Some of the women, it was a women's home, were members of our faith, and they would come to church in whatever they had. They didn't necessarily have nice clothes, and I remember one woman had ripped jeans, and she came. But I was observing the people around these women as they came, and it was like, oh, I don't dare touch them. And I even, for our den meeting, parents would not allow their children to walk in front of this home where they lived. And yet here these women were struggling to be sober and clean. And it just broke my heart because they had such stories. And it's been like 6 years, and there's a whole handful of them that I still keep track of on Facebook, and they're still sober. After all these years, they were trying so hard. Now, it didn't happen with all of them, but they were faithful, and they were just trying really hard. But of course, coming straight off the drugs and the alcohol, they looked horrid. And that's a discrimination right there. But still, anyway.
I hope all these questions are getting all of us to ponder what it's asking and applying that into our lives. Okay, my next question goes to Leslie again. Let's see, Leslie, you get number 8. Number 8. Where do you see prejudice?
I see prejudice in my neighborhood sometimes, unfortunately. I see prejudice at the grocery store. It's really interesting to me now that even in my own mind, because there's such a demand for workers in the service industry, sometimes I judge those I see in the fast food restaurants. And I mean, I'm not judging them, but I'm like, there's just something in your mind that says, that it's a different level. Maybe this is a different level of employees they're hiring. But then I stop to think, every person deserves a job that wants to be there. So I think you see prejudice every day, no matter where you go.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. But you don't see it because it's everywhere, right?
Right.
Okay, back down to James. Let's see, James, you're going to get number, where'd it go? Number 22. In what way is your world diverse?
I have a son-in-law that is half Peruvian. I have a daughter who is mulatto. And so I live in a diverse family as far as racial goes that way. I lived in a LDS ward in California where we had more interracial marriages than we had same racial marriages, probably, or just as common. And that was probably the greatest part about that ward, is that we came from all different walks of life and everything else. And I think, so I have diversity that way. And I think the other part is just diversity and, education too. That's another place. Half the family's educated, half the family's not educated. That's another diversity that we don't think about sometimes, but that is.
My clock says we have basically 5 minutes left to go. So I'm going to go through these. For everybody, get yourself off of mute. And let's look at these 5 bonus questions, or at least some of them, in the next 5 minutes here. How might you personally combat prejudice and discrimination? What can we do personally?
Be an example, show people, invite people, speak to people.
Right. See something, say something.
Yep.
Be honest with yourself and be open that you might have prejudice that you're not aware of, and try to be better.
Yeah.
Go different places and be different places. Yes, travel.
Oh,
Get to
I
know
like
people.
that. I like that idea.
There's a Mark Twain saying there, but if you're interested.
Jared and Richard, I bet they could give us horror stories all over from having traveled all over the world. But we'll save that.
Yeah,
for-
I don't think I'm going to do that. One of the things that I always think about, we use the word prejudice all the time, but we don't really think about what it means. It means to prejudge. That is, we judge without actually observing and seeing what those things are about a person, whatever. It is so easy to simply jump to a conclusion too fast. Observe for a bit.
Next question for everybody. What gives you hope that people are becoming more accepting of diversity?
Partly what we're doing right now. We're talking about it.
I've got an example, and this is actually from one of the scout camps, which is kind of interesting. I was involved in I worked for the federal government and was involved in a little ditty that was a discrimination charge against one of the Boy Scout camps. And as we got more into it, we learned some things that they had done at the Scout camp to be more diverse. And they had a young man that came in a wheelchair. He didn't have any hands, and one of the things they learned while that young man was there at the camp was they didn't exclude him from anything because he just did things differently. And so the troop that he was with, they circled around him and stuff like that, helped him get around the camp where it was difficult, where he couldn't pass on his wheelchair and stuff like that. But they took him to the archery range, and this guy he didn't have any hands, arms or anything like that could help him. And he actually shot an arrow with his feet, using his feet and stuff like that to shoot the arrow. And that, I think sometimes we have to be accepting of people in their own way, and do the best that we can to not exclude them just because we have prejudged them. I think Richard really pointed out, sometimes we prejudge and we shouldn't do that, and give them an opportunity to excel in their own way.
What are some effective ways to address bias in ourselves and others? Now, I'm worried about the time constraint here, so I'm just going to have you ponder that. Because that's what you can do yourself. What is the biggest challenge when it comes to achieving social equity? That's a tough question because there's lots of challenges regionally and personally. And then the last summary question is here: what gives you hope that people are becoming more inclusive? Let's talk about that one just for a second.
Let me give you an example. Our girls troop, and I don't really like to use the word, but I don't know how else to describe it, that are 5 misfits. They simply don't fit anywhere within the social order. But they belong to that girls' troop. And they're all different. But they have learned to get along with each other, respect each other, and to like each other. That's what gives me a lot of hope.
Well, I'll throw my nickel in there and say it is a topic of conversation on every level right now. The Boy Scouts recently put together, the Citizenship and Society Merit Badge. And for this class, I wanted to go get a merit badge pamphlet. Merit badges have merit badge pamphlets. And I go there and they said, there's not a pamphlet for diversity, for citizenship and society. And I'm going, well, how do you, how do you do that? And so I
have a conversation like this one, Jim. Let me throw a plug in for this merit badge.
Okay.
I'm one of the few counselors in our council. We need more counselors. So if you look around and you don't have one in your units or close by, jump through the hoops to be a counselor. Everyone here's given answers that clearly they know what this is about and they can do it.
So this is what I found on the fact sheet. If you can see that. I don't know, I'm too close, I'm too far. There we go, fact sheet. And I just want to read this second paragraph on what is the Citizenship and Society Merit Badge. Scouts will conduct research, explore resources on their own, host conversations with adults, peers, parents, and community members, and identify actions they can take to ensure diverse or inclusivity and to act as upstandards. This merit badge aligns with the Scout Oath and Law, which collectively encourages Scouts to respect the beliefs of others and be kind and courteous. So this is a real self-guided badge. And I think that's a sign of the times. That's really good. Thank you. Is there any other breaking comments there? I've got probably, 60 seconds.
With that merit badge, I just tell the Scouts, if they've done a hiking or exploration merit badge, the Citizenship and Society is similar. It's just a self-exploration.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I'd like to make a comment. A few seconds we got left. Age was not mentioned, and I am probably the oldest member of this group.
well, we
There's
went
a
out of
lot
our
of
way to
things-
include you.
Yeah, there's a lot
Well,
of
you know
things
what?
that I think
Gender
we
wasn't
can't do
talked about very
anymore.
much either.
I think some of the questions we had in there ask about age and gender, because that definitely is part of this. Thank you for your participation.
Okay.